Hi, my name is Bill, and I am the Executive Director of Mary and Martha House. So excited to share Soulful Conversation with you today.
Soulful Self-Care Conversation. And I'm really excited today because many of you have heard me speak on this show and watched me on YouTube about something that's really dear to my heart, and it's coaching some amazing women who are touched by an awesome nonprofit called the Mary Martha House. And today, one of the few exceptions we have, because many times it's very rare that we have a male on our show, but I'm honored to welcome today the Executive Director of the Mary Martha House, Bill Chini. He is leading programs that help women and families overcome domestic violence and homelessness. He is also a U.S. Air Force veteran with lived experience of abuse and housing instability. He now empowers others through his work at the Mary Martha House and the Break the Cycle podcast. Bill, I'm so excited to have you on today.
Pearl, it's nice to be in such small company, I guess, is a polite way to say it. But I do want to start off by one, thanking you for constantly talking about Mary and Martha House, but more importantly, the work that you do for us and for our ladies in the shelters. I get constant feedback on how well that female empowerment class is going and how important it is to them. So thank you for what you do.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. I love hearing the feedback because, we don't often hear that feedback. And I love coaching the women, just kind of like meeting them where they're at and letting them know that, we all go through stuff and we go through stuff, and life can life on us. I interviewed a friend last week and I told her, I'm like, I'm going to use your slogan. She calls life is lifing. And I'm like, life is lifing, and it can life us in different ways that we don't know what to do, and, what are our resources. And it's interesting. You said that the other day, my husband and I were having a conversation about everything that's going on in the world, and with the shutdown and stuff, and resources. And he had this whole different thought about, well, there's all these resources out there, and I had to have a conversation with him like, there are resources out there if you don't know where to look, if you don't know what they are, but there's so few that it's like a backlog, and some people don't have the simple thing of being able to work with a minimum wage job, and they have to have that handout, that uplift. And so I'm honored. As I love talking with them, and I get to meet them not just in the house, but for those who don't know, I also do the one-on-one coaching, and I love when they come on because there's something about them opening up when nobody else is around. It's just the two of
Mhm.
us, and I can pour into them. So thanks for letting me be part of their journey as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to get started. So I forewarned
Okay.
Bill that we have this one question that we do at the beginning of the show, and we want to go talk to Little Bill. And I know you personally, so I know Little Bill has had some, has gone through some lifing, as we called it. And
Mm.
so we want to go back and get to know him. What was life like growing up? What did you want to do when you became this big adult and amazing person you are today? And how does it correlate to what you are doing today? So, for those that are new to the show, I always like to lead by example. And if you've listened, if you're my repeat listeners, you're going to hear my story again. But this is what we do. So, for me, growing up, I grew up in a household where my dad, did three tours in the Vietnam War. So, my mom was kind of the breadwinner because we got kicked off of base back then. You didn't stay on base when your spouse went to war.
Mm.
So, we would go up to upstate New York with my granny, oftentimes not. However, once dad got out of the service, and unfortunately he did not retire because he wanted out. And so I became the kind of the that's when my people pleasing showed up. I became the person who took care of my siblings. So that led me to wanting to be a teacher. So in school, in high school, we had a program where I could leave in the middle of the day in my senior year of high school and go over to the elementary school to teach. I love that. I love teaching with the kids. I loved helping the teacher out. And that's what I want to do. Unfortunately, I didn't have great guidance counselors. And my parents were not products of, my mom graduated high school, but my dad did not. There was no college and no idea how to go about it. So I didn't know where to go. So instead of college, I went to school of hard knocks. But I love to say that because I wanted to be a teacher, I became a great leader no matter what position I held in the School of Hard Knocks, banking and mortgage banking as well. And then now I say I get to coach all those ladies I would have probably had in elementary school. I get to coach them now, what is even more important. So for me, it's like the grown up Pearl gets to do what little Pearl wanted to do. It's just in a different category. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about me. What about you?
So, It's I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm actively in therapy, and I'm going through a lot of emotions and my through my past, essentially. And I've come to absolutely loathe the word normal, and it's because when we say the word normal, we are comparing it to something that only we know, and we don't all live the same type of life. What's normal to me is not going to be normal to you, and vice versa. With that being said, I grew up as a normal child, right? We all did, because that's what we know. I didn't know any better. I'm learning all these things now about how I was traveling through life. I can tell you that a young Bill wanted nothing more than to be a professional football player. That's never going to happen, though, because I'm horrible at it and I don't have the body for it. But just in general, I wanted to help people. I get enjoyment from seeing somebody else upgrade, or something that they can obtain. And so I think that's the preface of it. What more or less led to where I'm at today started back in my childhood, which to me was a normal childhood. I heard mommy and daddy fighting a lot from my bedroom. I heard things slamming against the walls. I heard doors being slammed. I heard, cursing in the household and screaming. That was normal. I thought that was normal, and grew up with that. Eventually, my mother separated from my father, and was doing the single mom thing with me and my younger sister. And over time, I think her path led her to be an abuser as well. She was abused from a very young age. Her first marriage, she married a narcissist, and that was the abuser. That's where I came from. And then that's all she knew. That was normal to her. And so she became very controlling. I was very sheltered as a child. And it was something, looking back at it now, and have been, looking at it over the past few years as my daughter was transitioning from high school into college, was to try not to be as controlled as I was as a child. From there, excuse me, from there, right out of high school, I got married and joined the service. Obviously, married at a young age. I was told over and over again, "You're too young. You're too young." And you know, I know more than you. I got this. you know, and everything was working out great. We had a lovely daughter, who we still cherish today. Is doing great in college right now. And that marriage didn't pan out, and I attribute that to my um, I attribute that to my inability to be an adult, because I was sheltered for so long. A lot of things were done for me. And I never saw dad doing the laundry. I never saw dad cooking dinner or cleaning up or tidying or vacuuming or anything. So that was normal to me. So when I became a husband, I was absent. I wasn't there. But to me, that was okay, because that's what I grew up with and didn't think anything of it. Well, my wife at the time had other ideas, and that didn't work out for her. So, but shortly after I separated from the military, I followed my first wife and I were already separated, but she wanted to move up for a job opportunity in upstate New York in Albany. And I didn't want to be away from my daughter. One of the things I promised myself at a young age was that if I ever had a child, I would never leave their side. I would never leave them alone, because I felt left behind at a young age by my father. So I picked up everything, what little I had, and moved up to Albany with them, and we were up there for 3 years. During that time, I found myself dead broke, homeless, living in my car, um, getting food wherever I could. I remember frequent times it would be 2 or 3 days before I would have a meal. There were many days where I would I'd take little relish packets from the hot dog stand, and that would be my lunch, was a couple relish packets. So it was a pretty dark time. Shortly before that, I had a suicide attempt. I did not feel like I wanted to carry on anymore. I was worried that maybe I was cursed and I was going to curse my daughter in the process, and a lot of bad things, obviously, playing into that. Unfortunately, drugs and alcohol played into that as well. But it was didn't really have a role model to go with, and I was spiraling and didn't know how to cope. And those were my weapons of choice. Shortly, I spent about 3 years in Albany, and then moved back to the Tampa area. Fell in love with the Tampa area. I was based at MacDill during my time in the military, so that was my first taste of Tampa, and I really enjoyed being around the area between Pinellas and Hillsborough County. There's wide array of things you can get into, and different types of people, and it was nice for that diversity. Um, and so came back, and I was in hospitality at the time. I was able to get a job at a resort down in Ruskin, where I had worked 3 years previous, before we moved to New York. So they hired me back on, and hospitality was fun. I got enjoyment out of anybody in hospitalities just went whatever, but it was fun, and the reason why it was fun for me was because I did have opportunities to help people, to make lasting memories for families that were coming on vacation. That was the part of the job I enjoyed. There was plenty that I didn't enjoy, but that was the one part that I did enjoy. And I worked hard. I think I worked hard. I kept my eyebrows down, and just I kept moving up that ladder, as they say, to the point where I was managing the resort. um, and I was pretty much getting sick of hospitality around 2019, and I said, I think I need a change. And I started looking around, just kind of putting feelers out. Still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew it was outside of hospitality. Um, Coincidentally enough, I had some conversations with the previous executive director of Mary and Martha House, Lori Herring, about getting into the nonprofit world, because it seemed like something I would have been interested in. Well, this small little thing happened in 2020, called COVID, and it really put a bind on a lot of things. Working in a hotel, we were still considered an essential business, so we remained open. And even if I wanted to leave, one, who's going to hire? Because all the businesses are shut down right now. And two, if I leave, we've already furloughed 85% of our staff or something. I was working 5 days a week on the front desk, and then going to my office afterwards to put in another 6 7 hours of being a general manager. And I thought, if I leave now, they're losing two pretty important positions right now, and they don't have the manpower to do it. So I stuck it out. Um, Thankfully for me, in May of 2021, the hotel sold to an investment group who was going to turn it into apartments. So no more hotel, no more hotel manager. I was out. It was bittersweet. It was sad to leave. A lot of good memories there, even as horrible as hotel life can be sometimes. Um, but I was so happy to be out. Um, Found out I had some VA benefits, so I went back to school, and was studying at USF. Um, and then in probably about June, we had gotten a call. By this time, I was part of the Mary and Martha House organization. I sat on the board, and somewhere around June, we had gotten a call that Lori had been hospitalized with COVID, and we kept tabs on her. We were very close with the family, and it just seemed to be getting worse and worse each day, to the point where she was put on a ventilator. She was put in the prone position, and it didn't look good. Um, Sometime in September, early September, our board chair reached out to me and said, "Hey," she goes, I'm getting so many calls every day from Mary and Martha House, just general questions, you know, looking for direction. Their leader was in the hospital. There wasn't anyone there to lead the charge. And she's like, I'm getting so many calls. I can't do my job and this job at the same time. She goes, would you mind stepping in on a part-time basis till Lori gets back? Um, and I said, absolutely. I was still going to school with the VA benefits coming in. I had a little part-time job. And I said, that's fine. It was supposed to be 4 hours a week. And we were lucky to see that in September, Lori's numbers levels started rising. She was getting better. And so I started part time, just in the office for 4 hours, and then I'd come home and do my schoolwork. Unfortunately, that first week that I started, Lori had passed. Um, it was on a Wednesday, and I stayed the whole day that day to make sure that the staff was okay. They had just lost not just a team member or a boss. They lost a friend. We all lost a friend that day. Um, and we sat in our morning meeting. We obviously shared some tears, but the weirdest thing, those tears turned into stories, and those stories turned into laughter. And after about an hour of talking with each other, everyone got up and got to work. And it was the most amazing thing. No one asked me for an extra break. No one asked for to go home early. No one asked for anything. Lori would have been the first one to tell you that there's no one person bigger than our mission. And everybody got back to work. And I absolutely fell in love with the staff. I've already had a heart for the organization, being through the abuse and the homelessness. And that Friday, our board chair stopped by to see how everyone was doing. And I said, what do you think the board would say if I put in my application? And she let out this huge sigh. And I was like, oh no, what did I say? And she goes, no. She goes, I've been trying to figure out all last night how to ask you to take this job on full time. So later that day, I gave her two pieces of paper, my resignation from the board and my application for the job. And later in the month of October, the board unanimously voted me in as the next executive director. And as I continue to tell people to this day, 4 years later, I haven't worked a day since. And I absolutely love what I do. We are genuinely making an impact in people's lives and doing good for the community, and I absolutely love it.
I want to thank you for like that was such it totally went exactly how unplanned it is, how I wanted to
Yeah.
go. Like to take us through like the journey of the story. And I want to I'm gonna unpack everything you share with us. But I mean I didn't know Lori. I didn't know her, but I just all the stories like Shannon and people here in town have shared the
Yeah.
story. She was an amazing person. And to think like the little Bill, like what you went through and leading us to like I'm going to talk about normal. You said it was such a perfect explanation and it just touched my heart too because of my normal. But to take everything you did and to God let and we have something else, two things in common I didn't know about till today when we talked. And I'll tell you that in a second. But to take all of that and be like and create this heart center of wanting to give and pay forward and like looking at that and seeing because I know how important Mary Martha House. I can see why Lori put it together. I remember when they were where they were before they have the house they have now, and I remember all the stories and to leave that legacy, and that's what I talk about on the show here often is what legacy you're leaving behind. But to leave a legacy of something that I tell the ladies all the time how you can bounce forward somebody's life. I think it's powerful that what she's done, and I think it's amazing. Was it the Little Harbor Inn?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So Bill, do you know that's where I did my first retreat?
No, I had
Oh
no
my
idea.
God. I did a
What year? What
weekend.
year?
It would be 9 years ago this year. So I did a weekend, I think it was a 2018, maybe 18,
Okay.
19, 21, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 20, around 17 or 18. So I did
Okay.
a weekend come and go, and I stayed in one of the rooms. I had a couple of the rooms there. So yeah,
Oh,
that's so
get
funny you
out
were
of
naming. I'm
here.
like, oh my gosh, we got a lot in common, you know. And
How
then
funny is
also
that?
my mom's family is from Albany, New York. I that's
Oh,
where
get
I
out.
went. That's where I would go when my dad was at war. So it was the Albany,
Oh,
New
yeah.
York.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I would go to Schenectady, or actually it was called Stevenstown. So little tiny
Yep. Yep.
Stevenstown. So that's where I grew up. But so it was really, as you were sharing the story, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you brought me through my childhood myself. So that was really, really cool. But
Oh, that's neat.
I want to go back what you talked about, the normal, because it's so true. Like
Mhm.
we don't know what normal is. We look at our friend and we think their life is normal, what their parents are doing is normal, and you said something powerful too, because I also grew up in a house where if my parents didn't know communication. I mean, my like I said, my dad didn't have a high school diploma. He took off and enrolled in the Marines at 17 years old, 18 years old.
Wow.
My mom ran away with him to Tijuana and got married, at 18 or whatever. And she turned 18 a few days later. That's why they went to Tijuana. But they didn't know communication. They didn't have any of that. And so growing up, when dad was home from war, and then when he was home out of the service, if they had a disagreement or an argument or something, they just didn't talk. And you walked on eggshells in the house, like you didn't know what was going on. Then all of a sudden you come home and they're like, oh, we're all good. We're happy. And so, and then for me, like I grew up over in West Palm Beach, Florida, where I went to school. A lot of people had money there. I went to school with Burt Reynolds' nephew. And so there was some money in my school. There was, little noses in the air with some of them. And so I didn't grow up the ability that they had to go just shopping at the mall and to get clothes or whatever. My mom, it was a Kmart. It was my store of choice. And
Thrift
so
stores. Yeah.
yeah. So my mom and dad were like, well, if you want to go shop like your friends do, you got to get a job. So at 12 years old, I saw two options. I can stay home and be miserable all the time, listen to my parents argue and not be happy and worry about, or and I wanted money. So I decided I wanted out of the house from that, and I needed to have money to go shopping. So I started babysitting at 12 years old. And back then, I think it was 15, 14 and a half, I could start working. So I actually started working where I shop was Kmart. And then
Nice.
I found my way up to, I graduated high school early because my timing of going to school, I was 17. And so for me, my mom and dad were like, by now I am paying my own car payment. I am buying my own clothes. I'm working full time and was going to high school as well. And so I graduate high school and my dad's like, oh, by the way, you're also going to pay rent. And I was like going, wait a minute. And you have curfew. I'm like, this is not make sense to a 17-year-old who wants to have fun with her friends. So I moved out. I moved out at 17.
Yeah.
And so for me, that, like you said, that's what I thought life was normal. Like people went through,
Uh-huh.
this is what it was like at home. And I
You
did
said you were 12 years old when you started babysitting?
when I started babysitting, I was 12 years old.
So that's normal for you. Normal for me, my mom was still picking out my clothes.
Well, yeah, yeah. So you see, so
And
it's a
that was normal.
yeah, and that was normal. Yeah. And I remember I didn't realize what normal could look like until actually before I met my husband. I learned when my parents moved to California. I was living on my own at 18, and I was like 18 and a half. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go. California sounds fun. Let's just go.
Mhm.
And my grandfather, who I was as much a daddy's girl as I was a grandpa's girl. And so my grandparents were out there. My grandparents are 25 years apart. And so I would hang out with them as much as I could because I loved hanging out with them. And so and I tell my grandmother to this day, they show me what that parental love could look like what
Mhm.
communication could look like, what it meant to be loved by a parent. And then a few months later, I met my husband. And that's when the world opened up to understanding there's all different kinds of, as you said, all different kinds of normal out there. And so when we did the thing my mother, who was Catholic, did not like, when we moved in together, you know, we, she was like, I remember sitting at a picnic table and my husband goes, your parents don't know? I'm like, no, I've been living on my own. Why do I got to tell them what I'm doing? That I'll just
Mhm.
give my new address. So we were sitting at dinner, and my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but he says, yeah, we're moving in together. Your daughter didn't tell you. And
Oh,
my dad's like, which is so funny. My dad's like, and what are your intentions? I'm like going, Really? What are my intentions? I just sat there quietly, right? And my husband goes, "Well, we'll probably get married." And I looked at him, I go, "I didn't say I was marrying you." And my mother's mouth fell to the floor. I'm like, just because I'm moving in doesn't mean I'm getting married to you, you know? So fast forward, that was October, and we got engaged in December that year. But when we moved in together, that's when learning communication, learning what the other normal can look like. Because Chuck's normal was also, loud talk and yelling in the household, but his parents had gone through the loss of a child as well. They went through a lot. And so if I was upset with Chuck, I just knew to quiet down, shut down, don't say anything, and then maybe
Mm.
it'd all go away. Chuck didn't like that. He was like, um, you gonna tell me what's bothering you? Because I can't help fix it. Or I'm like, nope, just don't leave me alone. And so finally, the best thing he could have done, he decided he was gonna have my conversation for me. So he would start talking to the invisible pearl and have a conversation. And I'm like, that's not what I would have told you. And he goes, oh, you have a
Love
voice. You can talk now. And I'm like, well, I would have said it that way. So fast forward, hence why we're together 40 some years, because I
That's
learned that
awesome.
from him. And so, he helped me, as you said, like upgrade my life. He helped me upgrade my life and, and learn that, like what you shared, part of my relationships when I was dating before I met Chuck, if somebody was in the service, I would say, thank you very much. I don't want to date you because I grew up that life and I did not want
Yeah.
that life. But my circumstances kind of like what you said, even though you had to go through the things of the homelessness and the addictions and things like that was part of what you had. That's like I tell everybody when I coach at my clients is like, we have to go through the path that God has set up for us. We don't understand it. We don't know why it is what it is, but we have to go through it. And then we come out that original person He wants us to be. And, it's not fun going through homelessness. It's not fun going through addiction. It's not fun, for me, like it's not fun for anybody to lose a child or lose somebody you love. However, there's a reason why, and we don't understand the reason
Mm.
why. And as we get to do the things we do, like every step we take leads us to something we're supposed to be doing. And like for you, as you were sharing, like I had no idea about Albany. I had no idea you worked at the hotel there. I was like, that all makes sense for what you do
Mm.
today. Because I remember somebody, I think I was talking to somebody, I remember who it was, and I was trying to introduce them to you, and they said, women's shelter, man. I'm like, and you got a problem with that? Because sometimes people can't wrap their heads around because I think to me, I think there's this picture again, we're going to go back to the word normal. I think
Mm.
people think that normal in abuse is a man and that why would a man want to do that? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, female do, parents do,
Yeah.
it's a whole different thing. And so I want to ask you that question. What do you say to somebody says to, because I'm sure you've gotten asked that before as well. It's
Mm.
like, and I just want to say like you the women love you there. They talk about all of you guys, everything you do, and what you said and described at that table when you guys lost Lori is the fact that it is a family there and they feel family there. And it's interesting because when I coach the women and they know, because there is a timeline that they're supposed to be at the house and they know their timeline's coming up. One of the things I often hear is, I'm going to miss them. I'm going to miss them. Like, well, it doesn't mean you can't still contact them. It's just that
Mhm.
we need to bounce you forward into your life because you can't stay
Yeah.
here the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
share with us, like, what do you say when somebody comes to you about that? What are some of the things you hear and how do you respond?
I, I'm usually able to shut it down pretty quickly, but it does come up, and it has come up sometimes privately, and then other times publicly. I've been, kind of in a group full of people. Well, why would they hire a man to do this job? And I get it. I get the perception. Again, let's get away from the word normal. And you're right. Abuse does happen both ways from both sides. Spouses could be a man or a woman. Statistically, it's more men are shown to be the abuser and more women are shown to be the victim. However, there is a huge uptick in reported numbers last year, and it for the last few years it's been one in every four women and 1 in every 7 men will experience abuse in their lifetime from an intimate partner. Um, the those have risen up. The It's like one in almost 1 in 3 women now. But one thing that really did shoot up, it almost doubled. Um, Nearly 50% of women will experience some form of intimidation, whether that be stalking, cyber stalking, anything like half of the women, 1 out of every 2 women is going to experience this. But here's where I think those numbers are skyrocketing. And you said it just a little bit earlier, and it's the same in my case. It's coming from the parents. And if you go through and when you talk to our ladies, nearly half of them, their abusers was a sibling, either a sibling or a parent, and somebody that they looked up to, and somebody that took advantage of them in their situation. So we're seeing a lot of parental abuse. And to clear the air for those who aren't very don't know much about domestic violence and domestic abuse, it's not all punches and kicks. There are many forms of abuse: psychological abuse, financial abuse. There's many different tactics that abusers, typically narcissists, will use to try and control that abused person. That's at the very basis. That's the very root of domestic violence, is narcissism, is control over another human being. And that's why you see a lot of human trafficking and domestic violence very parallel in those two fields. So it does get asked. Usually, I share a quick story. As you can tell, I'm not very good at quick stories. I'm very lengthy. I get that's pointed out to me on a regular day, on a regular basis. But it's I try and share a quick story of my upbringing, where I come from, how I've been affected, how the people that I have loved over the years have been affected by this. And so I share a little bit of my story, and typically, whether they're still skeptical or not, they don't show it. So we close the conversation from there. Um, but and I'm not going to lie, I felt a little weird when I didn't think about this at first when I stepped into the role. I knew I loved the work. I knew I wanted to be. I was. It's funny, being on the board. You're obviously making some pretty high level decisions for the organization. So I always felt a part of it, but I never felt like I was doing anything. I go to the board meetings. I'm there to help make decisions. And I remember Lori multiple times would catch me after the meeting, and she was like, "Hey," she goes, "Thank you for being on the board. It's so nice. You do so much." And I'm like, "What am I doing? I'm not doing anything." I've always been a hands-on person, and so when the opportunity came to where I could be more hands-on and more involved with the organization, like that, the thought of a man leading the charge at a women's shelter never even crossed my mind, because I was just so excited to get started, to get to work. And I will say though that I think as I've learned to navigate that, and as I've talked to more people over the years, those questions have kind of dwindled down a little bit.
I love that it's dwindled down, because yeah, I do see all the work you do and I hear the feedback and it's amazing. I'm not surprised by the 50% intimidation. That I'm not surprised, because I mean I can tell I was many different times, and I think also like has to go down to schools, like the bullying in the schools leads up to that, and I feel
Mm,
like that's a huge part in our world we're missing the beat on, is addressing the bullying in school. We're just like in so many different ways, kind of like just brushing underneath the rug. We have to address it. And I was actually talking with my sister-in-law a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about how, we had see this uptick with the kids like that 10, 11 years old. And I'm like, nobody's catching the correlation. These kids were at 5 years old sitting in a house, not learning social interaction or anything, because they were learning school on a computer, and they had no social interaction. And so we're seeing that. And that's, to me, that was a big piece we did miss during COVID. It's not figuring out how to get some sort of mental fitness while we're in this big
Yeah.
shutdown. So I'm not surprised by that number uptick like that. I want to go to the parents and sibling because as I shared my story, I've got a great relationship with my brother. My sister, it's no abuse there, but just her choices. I choose not to be involved around that circle. But my parents, they're authoritarian over you. Well, I'm your parent, you do what I say. And then adding to my dad the level of him being military, you jumped before he told you how high to jump kind of attitude. That was my
Mhm.
normal, go back to normal. But I remember like when I moved out, I learned because with Chuck too, like communication, I learned to like he pushed me. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? Go do these things. Don't he didn't let anything hold me back. And I remember as our kids came into play, we went away on a cruise one time, and my parents watched our boys. And I came back, and my mom's like, "You need to talk to Matthew because when he goes to sleep, he plays with his toys." And I'm like, going, "What are you talking about?" I go, "You talk about the army men?" She's like, "Yeah, he shouldn't be playing with toys when he goes to bed." I'm like, "First of all, you're grandma and grandpa. Who gives a baloney what they're doing? Let them get away with it. Mommy and dad are on vacation. Who cares?"
You should be
However,
doing nothing but giving them sugar all
let
day.
me
What are
give
you
you
worried
more
about?
toys to go to bed with, right? And then I looked at my mom and go, "Do you remember when I would go to sleep? I had a blanket that had a little ribbon thing on, and I would rub it to go to bed." She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Matthew's thing to go to sleep is playing with this army man. He's rolling him in his hands and he's going to sleep with them." So they could never grasp that. So fast forward, we moved to Florida. They were in fourth and first grade. And I remember something was happening, and one of the boys said, "You sound like grandma and papa." And I was like, "Ooh, like I don't want to sound like my mom and dad. Like I don't want that. I'm trying to not be that person or that example." And so
Sure.
finally, and that was triggering me. So finally we had to say, come up with something different. So I said, how about we pick a word? So if you feel like I sound like grandma or papa, we create a word. So we're big Buffalo Bills fans. So we picked the word
Yeah.
buffalo. And what happened was that's how I was also able to teach them communication because if they said buffalo, I no longer was triggered by, oh my gosh, you sound like my parents. It was, well, what about that made you want to say buffalo? Right. So we could have conversations. But fast forward, my parents divorced after 43 years of marriage. And then, I had not my father became racist towards my son Matthew. So set that relationship aside, try to bring them both back in my life because, I felt like a 40-some-year-old kid being pulled as a 7-year-old little girl that wasn't seven anymore. And so I put parameters around them. Well, they're still your parents. You love them, right? And so I remember Father Bill at St. Stephen's Church here locally. It's like, you don't pick your parents. God picks your parents. You're always going to love them, but you can put boundaries around them too. And I
Mm.
remember my mom a few years ago, we were trying to help her. Her health was not good. And I had decided before that I was divorcing my father. I had found out the things he was doing to my son, and it just wasn't right. So I literally wrote an obituary. I sat in a driveway for 3 hours going, what do I do with this information I got? Wrote an obituary to him being my father. I sent it to my siblings and my nephews who are now adults and said, when he's physically gone, I don't need to know. I have released him. I wrote it so well they actually thought he passed away. They didn't read very well, but
Oh,
but
Jesus.
but I released it. It wasn't, I didn't write. They just didn't read the words.
Yeah.
However, I still wanted my mom in my life. I still wanted to be there for her. I would have liked to have been there for my dad too, but his actions. So a few years ago, I tried to do the same to help my mom with her not doing well. She came back, and her instead of communicating, which again they lacked communication growing up, instead of communicating that this is not what she really wanted, her and her brother decided that they were going to call protective services for seniors on me, and I was like, "What?" Like they show up at our door and everything. I'm like, "This is just not acceptable." And so the behaviors of my mother, because that before that happened, when our son passed, my mother insisted on helping pay for Matt's service. We were at the point where we're like, okay, we know we're gonna have to cremate him because we just didn't have that money. You don't expect that to, that expense. And she insisted that no, she gave us the money. She will never ask for it back because we're like, Mom, we're gonna be very front. We're not gonna be able to pay this back probably before you pass away. And she's like, no, 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 I don't want it. Well, 6 months later, she was using that dangling narcissist, thing in front of us. And so fast forward, trying to help her, calls and everything. And finally I said, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I told my brother, my brother and I both had to step away because she did it to both of us. And he has a
Mm,
little boy at home. And I'm like, bro, it's more than just mom. It's my nephew too. And so I tell everybody how I divorced my parents. And they say to me, well, how can you? Because they are your parents. And I'm like, okay, let me ask you this. If my husband treated me the way he treated me, my mother and father treat me, would you want me to stay in that relationship? And they always say no. I'm like, so how is it any different? So when you were touching on parents and sibling, that brought me back to there because it's not any different. It's what we accept in our life and what we accept and what we know isn't the normal. Because like you and I, we grew up in those households, we think that's normal. So when they speak
yeah.
or we get in a relationship and they treat us that way, that's all we know. Oh, that's love. That's how it looks, you know? And so when
I,
you touched on that.
I'll give you another anecdote on the normal. We'd had a speaking arrangement at one of our local community college here in Hillsborough, and it was with a bunch of kids. We were there as like a panel as Mary and Martha House, and kids were coming in, coming out, asking questions, listening to what we had to say. It was a presentation really just about Mary and Martha House, how to support, how what we do, and things of that nature. And towards the end, I see this young lady, and there's just something off. Her energy is different than the energy she came in with, and we're wrapping everything up, and she's kind of hanging behind. And as the kids were filing out, the students, they weren't college kids, they're kids in my mind. As they're filing out, she's slowly walking up, and I just kind of looked over to her and I said, hey, I said, is everything okay? You know, my name is Bill. What's your name? Nice to meet you. She goes, I need to talk. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we went to the back of the classroom and we sat down, and she says, I think I'm being abused. And I said, okay. I said, are you in physical danger currently? She goes, no, no, no. She goes, listening to your presentation, I had no idea that there was a such thing as financial abuse. And I said, okay. I said, well, you know, tell me a little bit about your situation. She says, well, she moved from Jacksonville because her mom was getting to be too much for her. They could not live in the same place anymore. So she searched around, had some friends in Hillsborough County, decided to start going to college here in Hillsborough. And she was working at the time and collecting money. But, and this was her normal, it was a joint account between her and her mother, and they both had access to the money. So this young lady was going out, was going to work, was making money, direct deposit. Mom was taking out of the ATM her money, and would essentially proposition her and say, okay, I'll give you your money back, but you got to go do this for me. You got to send me this, or you got to go do this, or whatever. And I said, yes. I said, you're absolutely being abused right now. I said, that's that, you know, and went through the reasons why it's not okay, what things we can do. I actually got her set up with one of our board members who worked in the financial field at the time. Got her set up with a new bank account, got direct deposit switched back over so that she could cut that off from her mom, you know, all the way on the other side of the state, and she was still being abused.
Wow, wow, and it's just again, as you were saying that, my mother was playing in my ear. Go, well, I'm your mother. Even like, I mean, I was 20. My mother and I are 20 years apart because how young she had me, and even like she'll say to me, well, you can't talk to me because I'm your mother. I'm like, wait, if you want my respect, you need to treat me with respect. I'm no longer the little girl you could tell what to do anymore. I'm the whatever year old adult that can say, I don't accept this behavior and I'm not going to accept the
Yeah,
behavior. And it's interesting because my brother and I sort of, we've had these 2 years boundaries. And my nephew, he wanted to talk to grandma. So my brother's like, okay, it's not his fault. So he had explained a little bit what happened. And I said to my husband, I said, I give it 6 months and something's going to come out of this. And sure enough, we've hit the 6 month thing and, we're back where, oh, I'm in the hot, all this, the same cycle again. It's happening. And
yeah,
so it's sad, but I want to switch for a second because we were talking last night. I'm in a national mastermind group. We meet every Wednesday night. It's called the Moxie Tribe, and it's really amazing. And we were talking last night how it was funny because I read this somewhere recently how narcissist and gaslighting has become like this word. It's like a trendy word all of a sudden. And then we were talking about how gaslighting is really not the word that people think it is. You want to touch on that for us?
Do you know where the word gaslighting comes from that we use today?
No, tell us.
A 1938 play by the name of Gaslighting. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, and in the play, it was centered around a couple, a man and his wife, and the man is, think, Al Capone. He's just, gangster. He's into a lot of unscrupulous things, doing a lot of bad things, a lot of illegal things. And she's witnessing all of this. She's hearing the meetings, she's seeing who he's hanging out with. And she starts to question him about these illegal things that he's into. And he's just, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And she goes, well, you're talking to this person and you're hooking up with this girl. And he goes, what girl? I don't know what you're talking about. And he just kept feeding this line of, you're crazy. You don't know what you're thinking. You don't know what you're seeing. And so by doing that, the narcissist is creating a false world that suits them, that you get to stay in only for their benefit. So the term gaslighting does get thrown around quite a bit, and sometimes it's not accurate the way that it's being used. But the idea of gaslighting is creating is causing you, or forcing you rather, to not trust your own instincts and your own thoughts. I have a whole presentation on this actually, that is pretty new, but it's very thought provoking, because even certain phrases that we hear on a regular basis, such as, if I do something and you get upset, I may come back with a, I'm sorry that you felt like that, which is essentially, sorry, not sorry. That's your problem. You felt like that. You're the one to blame. So it's always turned around to make the victim feel like they're doing all this to themselves, and on top of that, they need that abuser in their life because they're the ones taking care of them. You're crazy and everyone thinks so. Phrases like that, when you hear that thing over and over and over again, it may sound silly to somebody who has not had to deal with that. But when you're told you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, nobody else will ever love you but me, when you're told that over and over again, you will start to believe it. And this is, and that's what I love about your involvement in the shelter, because you're doing a 180 on that. You're telling them they are strong enough, they are pretty enough, they can make it out on their own. And just hearing that and rebuilding that self-esteem is so important for them. So yes, gaslighting can be used many different times, but it's essentially creating a false world for that victim to live in while they have control of them.
Yeah, that I'm glad you. I did not know that's where it came from, and the explanation of false world, it totally makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I'm glad we touched on that. I love going in and telling the ladies that they are. I mean, we do. So those that are listening, I do funny things like we made them do scrubs a couple weeks ago. I don't know if they told you about that. They made their own
Yeah.
scrub, and I'm like, what are you
Yeah.
scrubbing away? And I actually had a really good conversation because here's the other thing. Like we talk about parents and siblings, your kids, your kids can become narcissists and be you. Like, I do hear sometimes stories in the house too where the kids are saying, well, I don't, yeah, you're still there, but I still need, and then they guilt you into this, right?
Mm,
And I had a conversation with somebody the other day. I'm like, I went through and said, this is exactly what you're going to say. And you're going to say, they don't even make a half a penny, but I don't even have a half a penny to give you. I'm like, we went through the whole, like, I gave her affirmation and everything. It was like, and she was so sweet. She was crying by the time we hung up and everything. It was really, really sweet. But,
yeah.
but I was thinking, I'm like, it's not just that, but our kids can, be abusers to the parents as well. And, and especially like with everything like going, if we go back, what we were talking about a few minutes ago about, what they went through during COVID, you're at a point where you just want to make your kids happy because they couldn't go outside and play. So you gave them everything. And there's a lot to be said
Yeah.
about making us work for stuff, making us, making kids, have to, earn stuff, not get the trophy all the time. I think we're seeing some of that product in the world today, and that can lead to some of their actions that they take later on in life. And so, I
Mhm.
think we could talk about this stuff forever. This has been
I
so.
could talk about it
I know
forever.
it's just like it, because all this too, like for me, like we're planning our 10th retreat next year. So if anybody's listening, we have our 10th annual retreat next year. And by the way, Bill, our house is called the Pearl. I
Oh,
was
get out.
looking for the house, and there
Yes.
it was. It's called the
Yes.
Pearl. Like, okay, it's a God moment. But I was
There it
thinking
is.
it's so amazing. But I was thinking like when we're meeting tonight, the ambassadors are meeting tonight. And it's funny. I'm going to tell them the story about us realizing that we had that connection, because I was thinking back to where we just did this come and go for 2 days, and now today we are doing this. And I want to share that 10 years ago, next year when I started there, we did come and go for 10 days, for 2 days. And here's the thing, all the stuff that we're talking about today and all the changes that we can make, you have to work on it. It doesn't just happen. You have to put the time, you have to put the energy, you have to put the work in. You have to set the boundaries. And I remember, so my retreats are no makeup, so strictly no makeup, including
Right.
the speakers. And I remember a lady came to that retreat and she insisted on wearing makeup. And when she showed up, I'm like, you're really not supposed to have makeup on. And I wasn't strong enough in my messaging to be like, you need to go to the bathroom, take it off. Now I'm like, you show up, you're going to, the Mary Kay stuff is in the bathroom to help you take it off. But would not buy into it or grasp it. And I will tell you, I saw her about a year and a half ago, and she's still stuck in the same place she was when she first came to that 10 years ago. And so it's really, really important if you guys are listening and take something from this, and that is that you have to take what was your normal and not make it the new normal if it's not right for you. And you can change what, as Bill and I have been talking about today, what your normal was in your life growing up, and you can change it, make something different. And the one thing I want to say too, Bill, is like with you and with me going out and sharing the story, don't be quiet about your story, because you can change the life
Mhm.
of somebody even if you just speak to somebody. I remember I
Right.
went to my first grief meeting 3 years ago, and one of the ladies was sitting there and she lost her child, and she was like telling her story and she was crying. She says, "This is why I don't like to come to this, because, and she's like, and it's been 20 years and I still get like this." And I reached over and I grabbed her hand and I said, "I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank you for sharing your story, because you are reminding me that this grief is never going to go away, but I have to learn how to still live with it." And I feel like I just talked about this on Saturday. I feel like I'm finally walking side by side with my grief and joy, because I am sharing my story, because I'm walking and I'm allowing it all to not be the normal of just sitting here in my house and crying all day, like to change that normal, what it could look like. And so
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story and sharing the Mary Martha House. And I want to take a minute here and give you the opportunity to share with everybody, how do they reach out to you? How do they reach the Mary Martha House? And if they want to make a donation, how can they make a donation?
Yes, absolutely. So Mary and Martha House, like I said, we've domestic violence shelter. We've been around since 1982. We have a website, marymarthahouse.org. We love to take donations. Any nonprofit does, but as I always say in our presentations, I think our number one way that you can help us out is to just talk about us, to let people know that we are there. We can't help somebody if they don't know that we exist. So getting that awareness out, letting them know that there is a place for them to go that will take them on as an individual, not as a number. We do care for them. We see them all the way through the program, and they'll get to meet Pearl in her female empowerment class. And we love to do speaking events. So if anybody wants to contact me or the office, more than welcome. And we'd love to set up some presentations. And Pearl, I'm happy we get to extend our conversation. As you said, we could talk about this all day. And in a couple weeks, we will be talking about it again all day. You're going to be a guest on our podcast called Break That Cycle, because you're absolutely right. Everybody deserves a chance to tell their story. Not only do I find it, and many people that I know that carry trauma with them, they say when they're able to tell their story, they get a little bit of relief from that. But more importantly, there is somebody out there that has gone through what you've been through and doesn't know how to navigate it, and doesn't have that role model to look up to and to ask questions. So it's nice to hear people's stories. We talk about a wide variety of of topics from uh, suicide prevention to sexual abuse and sexual assault to narcissism. In the future, we're going to have episodes on youth violence, human trafficking, and then you'll see Pearl on one of our episodes, which I'm super happy and excited for. So to break that cycle, and yeah, there's my elevator pitch, I guess.
Awesome. And we're going to put everything in the show notes. So if you were driving and couldn't write anything down, everything will be in the show notes. You can grab it as well. I'm excited to come be on your podcast too. And I have
Yes.
a connection for you for
Okay.
the youth one. I have a really good connection for you. He's local here too. So and
Awesome.
he's an adoptee himself, and I think it's his story is powerful. So I think it'd be a great connection for you
Okay.
for that. So
Yeah.
I'll get you guys connected. But all right, so I forewarned Bill that we have our better questions, better life. So we're going to shuffle the cards, and you're going to tell me when to stop, and then we're going to have you read it.
Is it okay to be nervous? I don't know what
Oh,
you
yeah, be
got there.
nervous.
All right,
There's
stop.
nothing. Oh, this is a good one. What am I worth?
What am I worth? Oh, you hit me. Now I'm going to take this to my therapist because this is one of my hardest things to do is to talk about myself. What am I worth? I'm worth a laugh at least. In any event, I will make you laugh one way or another, and I think just having a little bit of joy in the world is something we could all use right now.
Yeah, I love that. That is so cool. I love that how that card these cards is amazing. I use the cards with the ladies too sometimes. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna bring them up again because it's I forget about them sometimes. But yeah, and you are worth like you do you bring a lot of laughter and fun, and I love watching you and your wife together because you guys have fun together. So it's a lot of blast. I think for me, what am I worth? I'm worth that my voice to remember that my voice is important and that to not let it quiet myself. So sometimes
Yeah.
I might sit back like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. But when I do and I go with my gut, it always brings something powerful. So hence why I do this podcast too. So
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
so I want to thank you so much. And for those that are watching for the first time, thank you for joining us. And that if you are sitting there wondering how you can connect, you can like and subscribe below. But I just want to remind you before you leave this show with us today that you come into this world, you are a rough oyster. You've got some work to do. But as you do it, you open up your shell, you're going to find your inner pearl of greatness. So go be your Shiro today. That was so much fun. I loved having Bill on, and especially because I get to talk about the Mary Martha House because they are so dear to me. I love the Mary Martha House and the ladies there and everything that's going on, and how cool it was to find out Bill and I had some paths that crossed before. But I want to leave you guys with thinking about this, and Bill touched on it. It's really got me um, the normal and traveling through life as our normal. Oftentimes when I coach with my women and I speak on here, I talk about we don't know what happens behind closed doors. We don't know what the normal is for your neighbor, for your friend, even your best friend that you think you know what her normal is. Why don't you sit down and ask her or him? Because we don't know what everybody's normal is. And what you might think is, oh, that's just normal, is not normal for us. So maybe you grew up in a household where communication was key and the communication was awesome and you had that great friendship with your parents. Or maybe you grew up in a household like me where communication was a taboo that didn't happen. You walked on eggshells until all of a sudden everybody talked again. Whatever that normal is, I would encourage you to reevaluate your normal. Is it something that you enjoyed growing up or not? And if it wasn't, what changes you're making? And also to ask that neighbor, that friend, or even the coworker, how are you today? Because sometimes the normal can be overwhelming and they might just need a listening ear. Have a great day.
See you again.